So I'm doing forgotten spa towns today because so much emphasis is put on Harrogate, Ilkley and Scarborough, but there were many other places as well. And this is collecting them together. And like I say, just looking at where they're located, is that I've missed one off this map because I didn't make the map big enough, and I ran out of time last night and could have done it this morning, but things tend to go wrong then. I've got one up here on the North York Moors at Goathland. So coming down here, we have a Hovingham, Ripon, a very late one there, 1904, 1905, Starbeck, sometimes called the Knaresborough Spa, Wetherby, Boston Spa, Gipton Spa, which is on the outskirts of Leeds, going towards Roundhay Park. Ossett, down by the side of the M1, where the water tower is, that you can see from the motorway when you're going past Wakefield, going south. Slaithwaite, or whatever you like to call it, Slaithwaite, at the top of the Cone Valley. Marsden's beyond that, and then it goes over towards Manchester. What else I missed? One of them fairly recently, Askern, about 4 or 5 miles north of Doncaster. And this one over here, Bridlington. So these are the sort of spa towns that tried to put themselves on the map, but never made it. They might have had a short golden period. Sometimes there's really not much to see, but that's how they were promoted at the time. So a lot of these emanate really from the very early days, being located next to sources of fresh water, whether it was a lake or a river. But really from Roman times, when the sort of population became urbanized, such as the establishment of York, then water had to be brought into them. So it was piped in along aqueducts, and it came out from beyond the River Foss. It came from that way out at York. And so they used channels, pipes as well. And then really after the Romans left, we sort of tend to have these pagan holy springs dedicated to gods. And so it was rather like sort of people went to visit these sort of holy wells, such as people, I guess, still today go down to Walsingham in Norfolk. And you can sort of get the holy water there to take away to drink. And it's a big thing in Ireland as well. As I once went to Knock, and there's lots of standpipes by the side of a road there, and you can fill up your Virgin Mary water bottle with water along there. So it became quite important at that time, and it's suggested that King Edwin was baptised at St Peter's Well, where the York Minster stands today, so it would be in the Undercroft somewhere down there. Other religious houses had these wells just off the main sort of cloisters at Mount Grace Priory, because they have one there as well. Associated with St John of Beverley, he was born at Harpham, north of there. There's St John's Wells there as well. Later, some of these springs were covered over. One I have seen is the well house behind Denton Hall, just before you approach into Ilkley on the Otley back road there. And they were like sort of private wells. So that's got a very fine building around it. It's got a square sort of pool in it. You couldn't swim in it. It's not big enough for that. But I guess it was the water there, and it was paved around. And but it was really the discovery in 1571 of a Chewett well in Harrogate that sort of popularised these spa towns. And there's some of the preeminent ones in Yorkshire, as I mentioned before, Ilkley and Scarborough. And it was really the place to be seen in company, especially in Georgian times. And these people brought in money. They wanted accommodation, they wanted food, and they wanted to go shopping as well. And that sort of rose up to these very important watering holes. And so really they came to take the waters. I guess it's a bit of an excuse to go on holiday. They'd amassed a lot of money, these sort of tend to be landowners, the gentry, really from the agricultural revolution. They're buying building their new halls, and then they're wanting to go on holiday. And these spa towns became this. And some of them, like I say, Harrogate and Scarborough, came fabulously wealthy, and that attracted other towns to have a go at becoming a spa town. They tried to put themselves on the map. Some of them had a bit of a golden period, but some of them never really took off at all, as we'll see as we go through here. So I'm doing these roughly in sort of chronological order that they were found. That's why I'm going to set off at the Gipton Spa in Leeds, which you've got a date there of 1671, and finishing up at Ripon, which is really 1905, 1906. 1906 period around there. So looking at the Knaresborough Spa, which is actually at Starbeck, and because a lot of visitors already came to Knaresborough to see Mother Shipton's well. They came to see the dripping, dropping or petrifying well as well. So there's sort of mineral springs around there, but I guess that people don't want to drink the mineral spring where it turns your clothes into stone. I guess that's a bit of a sort of not a very good marketing thing for that. And then later on, around about 1626, they found this mineral spring at Starbeck. That's where it gets its name from, the Starbeck. And because this is similar to the waters at Low Harrogate. So these are sulphur waters which were found around there. But really no development took place here until 1824. And this is sort of the buildings that you can see around here, which still stands today. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the photograph, but if you want to go and visit this is where sort of Starbeck Pool is today. So if you're coming from the Harrogate area, you cross the railway line at Starbeck, take the very first turn right, which is called Spa Lane, I think it's called, and follow that to the very end. You go for a very fine arch, and it goes into this area around here. There is car parking space around here because Starbeck Baths, the public swimming pool, is still down there and open. So you can come and walk around here as well. A pauper family served you here. I think they meant to live in this property here, largely because there was a workhouse at Starbeck at that time. And this gave obviously an opportunity for people to work down here, serving the visitors who came here. Later on, the workhouse moved across to Knaresborough. Became more popular with really the coming of the Leeds Thirsk Railway, initially not going through Harrogate, but coming through Starbeck, because I mentioned before, is that they'd complained about the smoke and the noise of the engines if it came into the centre of Harrogate. And so the railway station initially was at near the Prince of Wales roundabout at the end of the Leeds Road there, and eventually then put in a cutting across the Stray. But the original line sort of came through Starbeck after that, coming across the Crimple Valley, where there's a viaduct there, which is no longer in use. This railway line opened in 1848, and of course it was only like a 5-10 minute walk from the railway station down to here. But really it didn't really have a very long lifespan, because it was neither one nor the other, because people would have preferred to probably go to Harrogate or to travel out to see the offerings of Knaresborough, really. And really by 1890 it was all over. But if you walk down here, unfortunately it's got some very modern buildings which I don't understand why they're sort of built right along here. This is the original spa around here, and if you go through these arches there are outlines of the plunge pool in the footpaths where they originally stood around there. But really, like I said, by 1890 it was all over. This is a bit of film just of it to give you a better impression of what you see down there.
A mild sulphur spring was found next to the Starbeck, and baths were opened in 1828, called, confusingly, Knaresborough Spa Baths. They had competition in 1868 when a sulphur spring was discovered in a field adjacent, and the Prince of Wales Baths opened in 1870. The Spa Baths couldn't compete with Harrogate's, and they closed down in 1890. The Prince of Wales Baths were more fortunate. They became a public pool in 1939. You'll be glad to know that its water no longer comes from the sulphur spring.
So moving on then, so that was giving a date of really 1626. That was the start date I was working on there. And this is the Gipton Spa. I'm not quite sure how people pronounce it. This is located along Gledhow Valley Road. So on one side, you've got the Harrogate Road coming down, the A61, and Gledhow Valley Road is on the left-hand side just before you approach Chapel Allerton. And the Gledhow Valley Road runs along and links to the A58, the other side, essentially. And this road comes out, I can say local people around here will probably know, the Astoria Ballroom. So this stands, if you're coming from the Harrogate end, coming along Gledhow Valley Road, stands just back from the road. It's visible from the road, and the next property along is the very first house on the left-hand side. So it's really at the Story end, the Hare Hills, Oakwood end of this road. So it's about, I guess, about a mile along there. You go through open woodland and things like that. And so this is the bathhouse down here. And you say, I don't know really much about it. I've tried to sort of read about it, but above the door, there's a lintel, which they've going to say put it in a plaque, and it says Gipton Spa. This bathhouse was built in 1671. Ice cold water from a nearby spring was conducted here to a sunken bath. Also inside was a small fireplace to sweat the patients after bathing. And that's what you see inside. There's a small square bathing pool in there. Why it's called Gipton or Gipton Spa, I've no idea, because there is an area of Leeds called Gipton, again, about 3 or 4 miles further over on the sort of south side of Leeds. So that's an old one. And I say it never really took off, but unusually it's still there today, mainly because, I guess, it's quite tucked away, and it would have been quite a trek for visitors to come out here. It's about 4 or 5 miles from the city centre, and I say in quite a difficult location, even today, although it is fairly obvious if you're going to drive along there. So that's the one in Leeds. And then probably more notably, and probably giving the game away here, is Boston Spa. In 1744, John Shires, he was a farm labourer. He discovered a sulphur spring in the banks of the River Wharfe, which is just onto the left of this photograph of the main road if you're driving through Boston Spa, going from the Wetherby end towards Tadcaster. And he drank this water, and it gave him a purgative effect. I guess it made him sick or something like that, because that was the thing about the sort of the Harrogate waters, was that it was seen as a good thing of getting illness out of you. I guess if it made you sick, if it made you go to the toilet often. So this was a part of it, was if it tasted bad, it was good for you. And this spa here wasn't actually called Boston Spa to begin with. It was called Thorpe Spour or Thorpe Spa, because across the river from Boston Spa is Thorpe Arch, probably more known today for the British Library and the Thorpe Arch trading estate. But Thorpe Arch is mentioned in the Domesday Book. The lands around here were given to the Arch family, and that's how why it's called Thorpe Arch at the end. And because even on the earliest map around here, 1771, it calls it Thorpe Spa. And because it didn't come Boston Spa really until the 1810s, between 1810 and 1820 type of period like that. But this became popular because in 1756, they built the turnpike road from Tadcaster to Otley, and this sort of gave the impetus for the expansion of the spa here. So it was attracting those visitors from York that would come through here first, because obviously they could then go to Harrogate afterwards, and we'll see in next to Wetherby as well. So that's how it sort of benefited from it round here, and it gave the impetus for the town to grow. In the early 19th century, I think probably 1821, it had a population of 600. I'm showing you this supermarket, the cost cutter here. I think they can't put their garish signs on here because this is a listed building. This is the first hotel to be built in Boston Spa, called the Farrers Hotel, built in 1756 by Joseph Tate. He called it the Royal Hotel at the time. He was a master mason from Clifford, and he worked with John Carr of York, building of Thorpe Arch Hall, again across the river. It was he who really sank the well. I guess he was looking for stone to build the thing, and so he probably saw an opportunity to widen the spring down there, take away the stone, and have a much more important place to go. He could have it paved round that spring as well, and people will come and drink the waters. It was popular with Boston Spa residents as well. They didn't have to pay for the waters, but those from Thorpe Arch did, and obviously the visitors as well. And it led to this huge development of Boston Spa, these very fine houses along there. This is the next sort of oldest property, or the largest of these houses. It was built as a vicarage for the Reverend Christopher Atkinson and his daughters. This was called St Kitts and was built in 1744. So, because just before the hotel was built, a good sort of 8 years before that. It was interesting to see that the vicarage came under Bramham, and the vicar of Bramham in 1812 described it as Boston Spa as a very fashionable and genteel village, quite modern and inhabited by families who contribute very handsomely to the income of the vicar. Of course, he would love the visitors coming in here and, adding to his salary. The church is on the way in from the Wetherby end. Just down the side, I think it's down this side if I remember rightly, is Spa Lane, because it's not very sort of glamorous today, but this is the road or the lane that people came down to the river wharf to where the Spa House still stands. You say of that sort of 600 people living in here around about 1820, 1821, 100 of those people were servants. So it gives an idea of the wealth that had come in here, why it's called as a genteel establishment around here. So it brings you down to the river, and I think you turn left, and it's the Spa House, say, stands right next to it. You can just see the river there. The first Spa House was built in 1810. And it enclosed part of the river as well, so that the idea is that you could drink at the mineral spring and take a dip in the open waters of the river. I think it had a sort of pool built around it of stone. And then obviously it wanted to be a bit more genteel. And this bathhouse was built in 1834 when the Spa Bath Company was formed, and they erected this building that still stands today. It's very important in order to promote your spas by having medical practitioners come along, extolling the values and the medical qualities of this water. And this sort of started to welcome around about 50 people a day during the seasons, I guess May through to September or something like that. They tended to open at 8 o'clock in the morning and close at 8 o'clock at night. But the problem was, come 1850, is that Boston Spa wasn't very easily accessible, largely because is that a lot of people were travelling by railway then. That's why the importance of Starbeck with the opening of the railway line in 1848. Wetherby was also on a railway line as well. And Boston Spa then meant that you had to make a particular journey to get there. And really, sort of by 1860, it was all over. Because unusually the bathhouse still stands. It's now a private residence, as you can see. I wouldn't be particularly wanting to buy it because it stands right at the edge of the river there and the river wharf. And so you can still see, you can walk, there's a path that walks on the side of the river down here, and it goes to the river bridge that crosses across the Thorpe Arch, or you can continue higher up and come out where the church is. There's a lane up there. So it's quite a pleasant walk. And I guess you're following in the footsteps of those visitors who came to the bathhouse here. So thunder was stolen, I guess, by Wetherby, higher, not about 5 miles away from Boston Spa. And this sort of changed a great deal in the year 1824. The lands here were owned by the Duke of Devonshire, and he decided to sell up. Really what he wanted was lots of money to pay for the building of Chatsworth House and its extensions and gardens and things like that. And he put up Wetherby for sale in 100 lots, and he sold those and got an income of £105,000 at the time. That's the town hall that stands there today, I think built 1834 or something like that. First built as a national school and then later becoming a town hall after that. It was also an assembly rooms upstairs as well in there. So I'm taking that photograph. This, if you know Wetherby, you cross the bridge, depending where you're coming from, turn left at the bridge, which brings you up to where the shopping centre is, where the town hall is. can park round here and a bit further on the road that leads out to Harrogate. And just beyond there, on the right-hand side, is the Roman Catholic Church. And on the opposite side of the road is the Leonard Cheshire home. And there's a sign there that points to the Georgian Spa baths. And you go through an arch which takes you into a bit of a park. And so this is really what you can see down there. Unfortunately, I gave some of my talks at Wetherby Town Hall. A man took me out there, was taken ill as we were walking there, and I never actually got to see inside in the end, and because it's one of those things that never got sort of repeated. So I've chosen some of the photographs that he sent me on from Wetherby Civic Society, so that's what I'm using here. So I've actually been down there, but not actually been in to it at all. And so that it's thought that the Duke of Devonshire actually built this spa bath maybe around about 1800, which would be right, coming to the same period that the construction there of the spa out of Boston Spa. So there were some rivals between the two of them. And what you can see here in this enclosure, there's some steps down that actually goes down to the spa itself. This is the upper story here, is really the where you came out into, is really the hot room after you came out of the spa itself, or the spa baths. That's a sort of pleasure pool in front of it. The river wharf is just over to the other side as well. You have got to come up here. You can't really walk up from the bridge to this because of other developments around here. That's why I'm saying you've got to come in by the Leonard Cheshire home to explore this area around here. But there's some outside steps on the side of this building which takes you underneath that building to where the plunge pool was. And so freezing cold water coming in here from the spring, and I guess you'd swim around in here, maybe get out, jump in again to get your circulation going. Once you got out the final time, they'd wrap you in a towel. You'd scurry up these steps into the warm room upstairs, where there was a fire, similar to what they had when I described the other ones as well. They always had a fire to warm you in these rooms afterwards. And there, I guess you could sit down. If you come with some friends, you could then socialise as you dried off and then could get changed again. And so I guess similar to the Boston Spa one, this went on a little longer because the railway came into Wetherby. But really, visitors really didn't want to come to these very small resorts. They wanted to go to Harrogate. They wanted to go to Ilkley, especially in the 1840s when the hydros came along and they put themselves through some excruciating treatments. So not only would they jump into freezing cold water or drink the smelly sulphur waters, but they went in for mud baths, electrical baths, and all sorts of other things, purgatories to put themselves through in order to make themselves feel better. So let's move on from Wetherby to Bridlington on the coast. Because it was only a sort of very small port. I think I've described it before, that the port was asked to be rebuilt in the time of Henry VIII because it was so washed away. And so it was only really a small haven down here, and it really wasn't a place for visitors to come to. Scarborough certainly was, but in Bridlington didn't have its first hotel until 1805. And really it was promoted at that time to come along for sea bathing, because that had taken place up in Scarborough. It's reputed to be the first place in Britain where the bathing huts were pushed out into the sea. So Bridlington latched onto that because it didn't have a spa here until a mineral spring was discovered all of a sudden in 1811. But like I say, it really wasn't hugely known. People didn't really come here to take the waters. And it was really only the coming of the railway again in 1846 that visitors came in a trickle to begin with, but it really wasn't until 1890s when a railway line was built across from Market Wheaton to Bridlington that visitors really came from the West Riding, from West Yorkshire into here, and that's really when it grew as a tourist resort as we know it. So round in the vicinity of where the spa complex is today, quite an unlovely looking building here. And I say this sort of ebbing and flowing well was found round here. And I say a well had to be sunk 40 feet deep with water coming up a pipe that extended up around about 8 foot up I guess to get the water pressure from the pump, you had to keep pumping it like that. And the Benjamin Milne, the collector of the customs or the tax or the water you had to buy there, said, of course he would, so pure and soft that it is used in washing the finest linen. And again, people really weren't coming here for taking the water. Again, I suppose it was an added attraction, whereas most people were coming for the bathing machines to go into the seawater here. What you can see behind is a spa complex, and that was built in 1896, again, really as a place of entertainment when lots and lots of people started coming in here to stay for their holidays. And this seawall here first had to be constructed to hold the tides back, and then this building was built, but it didn't last particularly long. The first one on here, it burnt down in 1906, rebuilt in 1907 as a royal hall, and burnt down again in 1937. So it hasn't had a very successful life, really. But after 1937, the building that we see today was rebuilt, and because it was extended a bit at the front here in 2006 and 2008. So although Bridlington might claim it was a spa, it wasn't really. I think they just added its name on as a cachet to bring additional visitors in to take these waters around here. So let's move down across now to Askern, which is about 4 miles north of Doncaster, not a place you'd expect to be a spa town at all. In the Edward Baines's West Riding Directory of 1922, he said that Askern was the spring rises at the distance of only a few yards from a piece of water called Askern Pool, of the extent of about 7 acres. That pool here, this lake, still exists in the centre of Askern, as you could see. White's West Riding Directory of 1937 said Askern was an elegant and fashionable watering place. It said that the Swan Inn opened its doors around 1820, the Crown Inn a few years afterwards. The manor baths were erected in 1814 and then rebuilt in 1828. They had a suite of cold, tepid, warm and shower baths. Attached to them was a large plunging bath, a pump room and a promenade room. Other features included a bowling green and beautiful walks winding through luxuriant plantations and along the margin of the lake. The South Parade Bath was a smaller establishment built around 1827. That's just off this photograph to the right. There's nothing to be seen at all. And to say the greatest development was in 1894. You can only see it from this old postcard here. Was the development here of the hydro, and say it was close to the pool, as you can see in front of it. The pubs. That's the earliest one there. It still stands somewhat. And basically it said it was a well-known pool. The new building was created from 2 school buildings. Upstairs, there were 32 bedrooms. Sulphur water used in the hydro was obtained from a spring in the grounds, which comprised about 2 acres. It later became the Miners' Welfare Club and has now been demolished. Again, it was well served. It was easy to get here. The line running from Doncaster northwards to Selby and on to York opened in 1849. It's a natural lake, and it's all gone now, and it really went overnight. It was very popular for people to come here, but in 1911 they sunk the first shaft of a pit immediately behind the hydro on the hillside up there. And really, that was the end of it coming as a hydro. And it really became a mill village, a pit village after that. And that's really what it maintains today. Because the hydro there was demolished. All these sort of houses which were associated with the spa have all been demolished as well. All sort of modern housing is along there. So it's quite a shame along there as well. To the south side, because a lot of these places, as I pointed out up on Ilkley Moor with White Wells, they had charity or poor baths as well for those who couldn't afford to go in to take the waters themselves. And again, a poor bath stood at the very southern end of this lake. It's now, unfortunately, a car park down there. So there's really nothing to see here at all, But it's a lovely village, because with this huge lake in the centre. It's quite unusual. Like I say, I think it's probably the only one of its type with a lake in the centre of a village like this, with all the houses surrounding it, but not a pretty village anymore. As this postcard, I guess, from about 1890 shows, is that you could go boating on the lake, which you can still do today, but there are lots of other pleasures to be had there. And unfortunately, there aren't any pleasures to be had there unless you like greyhound racing, because it has a greyhound racing track here as well. So let's move on to another place. This is Hovingham. It's right on the edge of the Howardian Hills, not too far from Helmsley, and south of this is sort of Castle Howard. It's been it's an estate village, really, and was stood at the northern end of the Forest of Goldridge that ran all the way down to York as well. Its history stretches back to Roman times, where the hall is today was once a Roman villa. They found mosaics and pavements and other things around there when they've done hall extensions and rebuilding. The hall is just behind here in the trees, because it's quite a small village. The hall there is home to the Worsley family, because they probably 4 or 5 years ago now, we had a day trip out to Hovingham Hall. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't brilliant. But because it's only open a couple of times during the year as well. The Worsley family have owned Hovingham since 1563, and they are still associated, well, they still own the properties today. So William Worsley today is a great grandson of the original Worsley who settled here and started building the hall. So this was really promoted as a spa town, but nothing ever happened, really. The only thing they came to do was to build the Worsley Arms Hotel in 1838. And because this was really built as a visitors to come to the spa here. Unfortunately, the spa, the spring, wasn't in Hovingham itself, but it's 2 miles out on the road that goes towards Helmsley. And really, it never developed because people didn't want to take that journey out to there. When, like I say, another place that you could go to was you can walk out your hotel room and take the waters in one of the bathhouses or wherever. And so Hovingham never really developed as a spa, but it hoped to. But it's a lovely village today. It's got an artisan bakery there and other things, so it's quite a nice village. On the green, there's an old schoolroom, which Pevson said it was one of the worst buildings he's ever seen. I think it's quite unusual and quite quaint, and maybe I ought to include a photograph of that. So from Hovingham, I'm going to another spa town that never really took off as well. And I guess they were trying to get visitors to here. This is Goathland on the North York Moors. I guess they better nowadays promoted as the home of Heartbeat, the ITV series, and Harry Potter, and certainly the North York Moors Railway. And really, it was the coming of the railway. It was built through in 1835 by our railway king, George Hudson of York. He built the railway really for two purposes. He wanted the transportation of iron ore to be used, but he also wanted to connect York through with Whitby. He bought the West Cliff estate there, and he wanted to develop it as a place for visitor attractions, and that's why the West Cliff in Whitby has got such fine houses on that, because that was part of a planned estate around there. And that was the intention of the railway to come through here. But initially it was a horse-drawn railway, largely because of the gradients, really from Goathland going down towards down the hill there, is that the engines, when it's initially built, weren't large enough to haul it up. It's Beckhole, the village at the bottom of the gradient. Eventually, they built another railway alongside it at a lesser gradient, which then steam engines could come up. And steam was really introduced here, I think 1846 or 1848 or something like that. And I guess this was to put Goathland on the map. If you can get your visitors to Pickering to visit the castle, then come halfway across here, get off at Goathland, you can go look at visit the spa, get back on the train and go to Whitby. Or if you're staying in Whitby, you can catch a train and come to Goathland. And so it was really promoted as a spa, but there's really nothing here, really. There's no sort of well or bathhouse or anything like that. So visitors will come up to here. And the idea was that there is a hotel here, probably better known as the is it the Aidensfield Arms? I've never seen Heartbeat. So this is the Goathland Hotel, just up the very steep slope from the railway station. So visitors will come here. But I think the main attraction was for them to go and walk, either stay here and then walk out to Mallyan Spout, a bit further away, where they built the hotel there in 1892, and to visit the spout down here. It's the largest waterfall on the North York Moors, stands 70 feet high. And I guess that was sort of part of it. So it really wasn't a spa as we'd technically know it. And there's nothing there to see today, really, apart from the building of those two hotels for the visitors who came in here. And again, really from 1850, I guess, to 1890. Like I say, it was only become a visit attraction, really, since the filming of Heartbeat and Harry Potter around here, really putting it on the map. So let's go right across the other end of Yorkshire and going down the Colne Valley. Colne Valley runs from Huddersfield out to Manchester. It goes to, branches off to Oldham and down to Ashton under Lyne as well. And if you go along the main road, you can see the railway actually here in the background. The line still exists today. That's the one I think people have claimed as being one of the poorest served railway stations in the country, is that you can get on but might never ever get back to Slaithwaite, as the locals call it round here. And this developed as a spa town, quite unusually, because obviously it's known today and probably has been as a textile manufacturing town. The next one further up is also a textile manufacturing town of Marsden. But they started to develop here in the 1820s when a sulphur spring was found next to the River Colne, which just runs along behind here. The River Colne runs right through the centre of Slaithwaite, Slaithwaite, depends whichever way you want to call it. And from the main road, there is I'll just show on the next photograph here, there is a signpost there about the Spa Gardens. You can walk down there, and essentially when you come down there, it is now 2 football pitches and a bit of a children's playground, which I guess the children's playground is there, completely flat and grassed over, so there's nothing at all to see down there. But it came very popular, as you can see from this. This photograph dates from about 1890. As we can see here, there's a purpose-built spa baths built by local businessman Richard Varley. These were built in the 1860s. And the local historian says in a book, Slaithwaite Spa was the Harrogate of the district. The first Wednesday in May was one of Slaithwaite's great days, the annual opening of the baths. Because that original 1860s building was extended in 1889, and people come here and it was used for dances, public meetings, brass band contests. Obviously, you can see the brass band there, and there's also a bowling green and other amenities. But it seems to have fairly quickly fallen out of favour. Whether this was before World War I or not, we don't know. But in 1925, it was described as an untidy, bedraggled place, which is not even genteel in its shabbiness. So I guess it was all rotting away down there as well. The only bit of the spa that you can see today has got nothing at all to do with this, but the mill that stands in the background is called Spa Mill, and that's what you can see down there. And you can still see the railway line running along there through Slaithwaite. So that really came to the end, like a lot of things did. It was World War I that saw all these things off. And again, it affected Harrogate, Scarborough, and the rest of the people that came before the war never really came back after the war. And it was all important to have important people to these places, especially royalty when it comes to Harrogate. You know, they had them from Russia and all sorts of things that really put their name on the map. And again, out at Scarborough with the royal family as well. And so it was all part of the promotion of these things. But like I said, World War I really put an end to all these sort of amenities, not just these, but also local events as well. And they never really recovered after World War I. Most unusual one of the lot is probably Ossett. This is the, on this map here, I would say the M1 runs up about here. This is Wakefield city centre is over here to the right. The main town of Ossett is a bit over here to the left, and then it drops down the hill into Dewsbury. It's probably easier that you probably don't want to go and visit it here, but it was quite interesting to see what was down here. And essentially, this lane here up to Spring End comes out of Horbury, and this road here goes up to join the sort of Wakefield Dewsbury Road higher up here. So it's quite hard to explain where it is, and that's what I'm trying to show you on this map. If you look down here, it said Ossett Spas around here, and obviously you see over here the woolen mill as well. So it wasn't in the most glamorous of places, and certainly not today. It's in the middle of an industrial estate round here. And again, the natural springs were found here by Joseph Ward, a Horbury stonemason. I don't know what it's to do with stonemasons and springs. And he was given a parcel of land round here as part of the Horbury and Ossett enclosures. It took place around about 1807 and probably ran on for about another 10, 15 years or something like that. And he recognised the sort of attractive properties of the water. Again, it was a sulphur spring, so perhaps he'd heard or had actually been to one of these other sulphur springs, maybe up in Harrogate. But again, rather like these other places, he wanted to sort of market it very well. He called them the Cheltenham sulphurous baths. So looking at outside of Yorkshire, so there's probably, again, no confusion with the Harrogate springs, and that they were actually going to come to Ossett. And to add I said that was a bit of a cachet that he was offering them at. We know that he put them up to let in 1829, and the advert ran in the local paper. The premises are delightfully situated, and the waters have been analysed by several eminent men, doesn't say surgeons or medical men or anything, and spoken of by them as a little inferior to Cheltenham. They have gained a very high reputation from the many surprising cures they have performed. These waters are celebrated for curing gout, rheumatism, and the scrofula. Unusually, he wasn't without competition. So he had his spas here, and you can see down here there's other wells and things like this, but across the other side of the road, not marked on this map, unfortunately, James William Craven built a competing baths, really enough at the same time. He called them the New Cheltenham baths, just to add confusion to all of this. And because these sort of opened before the mill was open. The mill is sort of 1860, and I guess this is a map from just post that period as well. And they were fed from what is now the mill dam into his baths that he had there. Because he advertised them as New Cheltenham baths. Because the proprietor here at this time was a D. Land. Opened for the season on the 1st of May 1831. Annual subscription available for bathing. One person to the warm and cold baths, 10 shillings. For a family to the warm baths and cold baths, £1. Sulphurous baths, each 2 shillings. Board and lodging available at the bath house. The two baths then, spas, were then combined together. And we see a sort of a later advert from 1864 saying, this is all that you can see today, by the way. And 1864 saying, mineral baths, the original Ossett Spa baths, are open daily from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The waters are recommended by the faculty for I don't know how to pronounce this word, scorbutic and rheumatic complaints. Sulphurous baths, 1 shilling and 3 pence. Hot baths, 1 shilling. Cold baths, 6 pence. Every accommodation and refreshments, bed and stabling. Proprietor at that time, George Shaw. These baths here were bought in 1884 by bathroom manufacturer Matthew Wharton, and he wanted to develop them as the New Montpellier Pleasure Gardens, because they were expensive gardens. He proposed to build a lake, have rides and amusements, so more as probably today's parlance, a theme park type of thing to bring people in. But it seems though that he held an opening concert in Easter 1884. And nothing else was heard of the spa baths. And really, that's all you can see left of one of the plunge pools here, because it's in the middle of an industrial estate, and that's all that's been left. I guess there'd be walls there standing about sort of 2.5 feet tall. Down there's access down to it down the side of this industrial unit there. The company called I've lost it now. You probably wouldn't want to go anywhere because it's but there's one other building left, because they said that there were sort of hotel premises, and this was the hotel. It was called at that time it was called Goring House for some unknown reason, and it's now called Spa House today. And oddly enough, it does have a claim to fame. This is on Spa Lane, and it was once the home of the author Stan Barstow along here. So really, I say 1884, it was all over for Ossett. But going further north, up in Ripon, they haven't even thought of it being a spa town, even though Harrogate, 9 miles away, is on its doorstep and been very successful. And I don't really know why, sort of 1900, they decided that it should promote itself as a spa town. Little did they know, really, is that the World War will be 10 years away. And although if you go into the spa gardens, say there are small trickles of sulphur water, there really wasn't enough to drink in there. You probably fill a bottle, and then you probably have to wait an hour to fill another bottle if you're sort of going down from the spa gardens down to Skell Bank. And so they had to pipe this water in, and it came from Oldfield, around about 4 miles away, just slightly beyond Fountain Abbey, to give you an idea of where it was. And the hydro, which is now named Ripon Baths, but you can see behind there, it says Spa Baths on it, because there'll be sort of port cochere added on probably later to give visitors to here a sort of they could keep dry as they came. Opened on the 24th of October, 1905 by Princess Henry of Battenberg. The swimming pool behind, which is in a sort of more of a brick structure, very simply built, that was added in 1836, and that's why it's got Ripon Baths on the front there. It's about to close because there's a great sort of furore over a number of years, going back to, I think, 2015. And I think this is when I first started, did the first talk on Ripon round here. They are building new public swimming pool on the outskirts of Ripon, and this is meant to be, according to Harrogate Borough Council, close in 2021, but I guess it might last a bit longer, and then this will be turned into apartments. So this is really where people came for this spa baths, and I guess there have been similar to Harrogate, there have been the plunge pool, but mostly there probably been more of the mud baths and electrical baths and things like that that were the hydros did. There were the more expensive treatments that you could bring people into, and maybe they thought that if Harrogate was terribly busy, they'd be willing to come up here because it would be less busy. Maybe the price here was a little cheaper as well. And really what we see along the road called Park Road is next door to the baths is the spa gardens. You can say these had to have these attractions to attract visitors. That's the spa baths just there. And so this entrance to the gardens here, that there is a statue to the Marquess of Ripon, who I mentioned the other week when we looked at abandoned churches, the one out at Studley Royal. Marquess of Ripon was George Frederick Robinson. He was born at number 10 Downing Street in 1827, when his father, Viscount Goderich, was briefly and unsuccessfully Prime Minister, and he was made Earl of Ripon in 1859. He became an MP in 1852, and in 1871 made the first Marquess of Ripon for drawing up a treaty at Washington over Alabama claims and averting another war with the United States. He was also Viceroy of India and leader of the House of Lords. He died in 1909 at Studley Royal, and buried in the church out there. This statue was actually put up during his lifetime in 1896. And again, as you can see here, the gardens were laid out, with bowling greens. There's today the Sun Parlour Cafe, and there's a pitch and putt and even a crazy golf course. Over the hedge to the spa gardens is the Spa Hotel. Unfortunately, this has just closed down this year. It opened in 1907 and has been run by the Hutchinson family from the beginning to the very end. And it's quite remarkable. I couldn't find a bit of footage. I don't think I've had it together, but they've got croquet gardens here, croquet pitches here, up to international standard. I understand that croquet in certain parts of Yorkshire is very popular, and I think they mentioned again going over to Huddersfield area, there are croquet pitches over there, and this is where they used to come for these international croquet competitions on these pitches. I think there's 2 or 3 of them along the side there, if I remember. So unfortunately, like I say, it was in imminent threat of closure because they put the hotel on the market in 2018 because it was losing money, and they wanted, I guess, a major investor to come in here. And it's an overly large hotel, I guess, for visitors who come into Ripon today. So really, again, I guess it's remained along here, but it has never become a fully fledged spa. It came along far too late to become a recognised spa town. So unusually for me, that's sort of come to the end of looking at that, but maybe a bit on spa water, because if you couldn't get to a spa town, then you could actually drink its waters. And the Harrogate water was first bottled in 1740, and it continued to be bottled until 1969. It actually probably closed right at the wrong time, because really in the 1970s we had the coming along of sort of Evian and all those French bottled waters that filled our supermarket shelves. And in fact, the last time Harrogate water was bottled in 1969, it wasn't actually bottled in Harrogate, it was bottled in Wakefield. The water was taken over by tanker to Wakefield and bottled there. Wakefield is actually quite a big bottling place today because of the quantity of water underneath. That's where Coca-Cola, just off the M1 junction into Wakefield, has its bottling plant for the UK. So they're drawing on millions of gallons of water again to make all their different products in there. I think that opened in about 1992 or something like that. But they chose that location due to the water there that obviously meets their exacting standards. But come back here is then in 2002, the Harrogate Water Company reopened. It's at the top end of, I guess, in the pine woods, in between the Valley Gardens. And if you're going out to Harlow Car, it stands in a compound there. It's quite a modern building behind a metal fence. There's, if you're going to walk in the pine woods, there's also parking along the side there with some awkward wooden posts in it. I don't know why they put there, maybe to stop buses and other large vehicles parking there. And so this started in 2002. Come this year, 2020, in June, it was bought out by Danone. And unusually, or maybe do as these international brands work out, Danone owns both Evian and Volvic brands of the French waters that came over to here in the 1970s. So that's just a very short bit of film here of the bottling plant at Harrogate. Filmed in 2007 or 8 or something like that. This was done by the first bottling company where Harrogate Borough Council went 50-50 with a private company who then sank the well down here. And then I think it was sold out in about 2008 or 9 or something like that to the Harrogate Spring Company, which in turn, again, in 2020 sold out to Danone. So let's have a quick look inside of the bottling plant.
Harrogate water was bottled once again after almost 30-year gap. A new 45-metre deep borehole was sunk on Harlow Hill. In May 2002, the first bottles rolled off the production line. Between 16 and 17,000 bottles are filled here every hour, day and night. It's all come a long way since water was either barrelled or carried in leather bags. Production has grown to over 30 million litres every year. And the sparkling Spa water was voted the best bottled water in the world in 2003 in a blind tasting at an international competition in America. The water here is bottled in both glass and plastic containers. and a new 10-litre box has just been introduced. It comes as both still and sparkling water. One nice touch, the distinctive 1596 label on the glass bottles, commemorating the first reported bottling of Harrogate water. It's all helped to put Harrogate on the map once again, with the water to be found on international airlines, on trains, in schools, and on supermarket shelves throughout the United Kingdom.
There we are, how Harrogate promotes itself now in every supermarket and petrol station nationwide and further afield as well. So that brings us to the end of looking at these smaller, forgotten spa towns.